Hello everyone. I can barely see you back in the back of the room. So I'm David, and it's a pleasure for me to be back in Brăila. It's my third time here, but I've never been inside this lovely building, so it's a real pleasure to be here with you today. Special thanks to the organizers, who I know put a lot of hard work into this event. Today I'm going to talk with you about the ultimate career dilemma. That's how I called it. It was a dilemma I had when I was in high school. I still have to some degree, and hopefully together we'll be able to solve this together for myself and for you guys as well. We're going to discuss a bit about specialist and generalist. These are two types of careers you can take. A specialist career, for instance, a generalist career, for instance, is a career in which a person knows a lot of things about different subjects. He's called a jack of all trades in English. He's the kind of person you invite for a TED Talk because he has plenty of ideas to share. A specialist is a person who knows a subject really well, who has expertise in one thing and one thing only. He is usually the expert you call for, maybe if your kitchen sink is broken, you don't call a TED speaker, you call a plumber probably. So he's the kind of guy, a specialist. To better understand the differences between the two, I would take the example of history. Maybe some of you guys want to study history in university. If you're a generalist, you will study history as a broad subject. You will study history without caring too much about antiquity or Renaissance. You study everything, let's say, equally. If you're a specialist, you will develop a passion probably for a part of history, be it ancient Greece or be it the medieval times. So by the end of university, for instance, a generalist who studied history might go into careers such as media, publishing. He could write books. He could do various things, diverse things. Whilst a specialist, without being actually bad or good, he can do more specific things, but really well. He can be a professor, he can be a researcher, which are two fields, two domains in which he can actually develop his expertise and his passion even more. In this talk today, we're going to analyze a bit the pros and cons of being a generalist and a specialist, and we'll also look what employers are looking for in the job market, because I know many of you here are either in high school, either in university, so in a way at the beginning of your career. And if you're not in high school or university, because I know there's some people who are already working for a few years, it's never too late to ask whether or not you've made the right decision of being a specialist or a generalist. We're going to start with generalist, and I have to confess before I say anything, I'm a generalist, so I might be a bit biased in this whole talk, but I will try to balance the way I present both of them. The main advantage of being a generalist is that the obvious thing, you know a lot of things about a lot of subjects. So basically, if you're invited to, give expertise to a company, you'll be able to have more than one lens, more than one glass to see the potential solutions. Compared with specialists who only have one expertise, one way to tackle the problem. Another really important thing for generalists is that because of their different expertise and different skill sets, they're able to come up with innovative solutions, outside-the-box solutions, which again are really helpful in the uncertain times we live in. Another advantage for being a generalist is that you have more transferable skills that employers now are looking for. Because you usually job hop a lot as a generalist, you can get different insights from different careers in different sectors. So for instance, if you learn a lot about communication and project management, you can apply these transferable skills to any industry you end up working in. And last but not least, career flexibility. Being a generalist offers you a lot of career flexibility. In my case, in the last 3 years, I changed 2 careers. And I know it might be a lot, I exaggerate a bit, I have to confess, but the skills I learned and the broad knowledge I gained in university, studying very varied subjects, offered me the chance to job hop, to change jobs quite often. However, as with everything in life, there are pros and cons. And for the generalist, the main con is that you're quite superficial in the way you tackle problems, because you might know a lot about many things, as I said, but you only see the tip of the iceberg. So if you know the iceberg metaphor, you only see what's above the surface. However, specialists, and this is going to be their advantage, I'm going to talk briefly later, they see the whole iceberg, so they can go more in depth to tackle any issue. Another con, let's say, less positive thing about generalists is that their job security is a bit different than for specialists. They're easier to replace because nowadays the trend is going up for the number of generalists who are in companies. So it's easier to replace the generalist with another generalist, but specialists are becoming harder to find. And last but not least, and this was a lesson I had to learn the hard way, being all things to all people. Generalists are usually the people who you go to with any problems, you know? It's not like the plumber example I gave initially. With generalists, you can have relationship problems and you ask the generalist. You can have, I don't know, business problems, you ask the generalist, because he's the person who might know a bit about your subject. My advice to you, and as I said, I learned it the hard way, is don't say yes to everybody. Try to balance yourself, because being a journalist and also being a yes man means you're going to burn out quite fast. It means you're going to get tired really easily. Being a specialist has also some advantages, and for many of you who are probably looking into a career like medicine, architecture, specialist degrees, the main advantage is that you're going to be probably paid more initially. Because obviously you invest more time in your studies, you spend more time in university, so employers are usually going to show their value by paying you a bit more initially in your career. You'll also be more valuable to the companies. You'll have more internal power, so even when you negotiate your contract or when you negotiate a few extra perks here and there, you will be able to be more demanding as a specialist, because you know the company cannot find somebody like you so easily, not like with generalists. Best for specialists, I would say, is that you become a true thought leader in your industry, which means you become somebody people go to for specific expertise, specific knowledge, and this could really help your ego a bit, because you become the, you know, the Dr. Phil of your industry, if you know the Dr. Phil show. So you become the go-to person for that specific industry. The cons, the negative side of being a specialist. As I mentioned before with the generalist, the opposite is with specialists. You have less career flexibility. If you, after 10 years of having a career or 15 years, decide to change your career fundamentally, you want to change the industry, it's not impossible, but it's a bit more difficult than it is for generalists. Also, your opinion, as I mentioned earlier, it's not valid in all sectors. It's valid only in the sector you're actually proficient in. And last but not least, it's harder to find a suitable job, because again, the number of specialist jobs are becoming slowly less and less. So for journalists, it's much easier to job hop, as I said initially. So the question you probably all asked yourselves, what are employers looking for in today's world? And you don't have to do much research to find out, especially in Romania, that people usually look for specialists. That's why your parents tell you to go to university to study law and medicine. That's why society itself wants people to go and specialize, because it's easier to find a job after you study such degrees. However, the trend, and this trend is applicable in Romania as well, is that generalist jobs are actually growing, and there's more positions for generalists. Why is that? There's actually two main factors. First of all is the economic crisis, in which still many countries haven't recovered after, which means that many people who are specialists, they are employed by a company, and then because the company doesn't have money for another specialist, it trains the specialist it already has to become a generalist. So the specialist can easily become a generalist within the company he works in. Also, another issue, and this issue is specifically provided by tech companies, even like the one I represent. Automation is a fear many people have, and automation, I'm afraid to say, will first go and attack, let's say, jobs from specialists, because the easiest jobs to replace are jobs which require speciality, be it jobs as a stockbroker, as an accountant. Those are going to be the jobs that will be replaced first by machines, because machines obviously will have more power for interpreting data, analysis. So our hope as human beings is to never forget humanities, never forget emotional intelligence, because this is always going to be the main thing which differentiates us from machines. I want to take a break for a second and ask you, after this introductory presentation, let's say, about specialists and generalists, how many specialists we have in the room? How many people who are specialists, who are specializing in just one field? Okay, not so many. Is everybody a generalist? Everybody studies different things and has different objectives? You can raise your hand if you're a generalist, if there's any. Okay, so there's more generalists, which is good. It's according to the trends. Thank you for confirming that with me. I ask you this because, well, I'll have a surprise at the end regarding specialists and generalists. What are you looking for in a career? And I've spoken with many young people, high schoolers, university students. My brother, who moved in with me recently, who's a first-year university student in Bucharest, I ask him a lot about this question. What do you want from a career? Usually his answer is quite vague, and if the answer is vague, it's not a problem, but I just recommend him to be a generalist like myself, because I also didn't know what I want to do in high school. So if you don't really know what to do, what sort of career you want to choose, I would recommend being a generalist, because it opens you to more opportunities. However, if you're in the happy situation that you discovered your passion, your calling, I recommend strongly for pursuing that in university and specializing in one field and becoming a specialist in the end. What I do have to tell my brother and other young people is that this choice you now have to make, because you are at the crossroads, many of you, is not a choice you won't be able to reverse. It's a choice that you can always pivot from, because now I'm a journalist, but maybe in 2 or 3 years I'll become passionately involved in a subject that will determine me to become a specialist. So you will always be able to turn back and change your speciality. Also, another thing to remember is, I saw there's more generalists in the room. Never say anything bad about specialists, because the world still needs them. Basically, people who are specialists are still the people who are actually implementing in companies most of the things the leaders of the company, who have a tendency to be more generalists, say to them. So we need both specialists and generalists, and never disconsider somebody who's different than you. And last but not least, in this regards, and what I tell my brother is that hard work and passion, you need in both of them. And this is the common thing they both have. So besides hard work and passion, you also have to use your gut instinct a lot in your career and in your choosing of these two particular fields. Because if you think about it, I presented pros and cons, but probably by the end of the presentation you won't know what to choose even after it. So my best advice, and I apply this in my life, is always listen more to your gut instinct and then to your brain, because the gut instinct is your subconscious and it's always right. This is the hero's journey, and this is my parallel to you guys, and I hope by introducing this I'll be able to connect, let's say, a bit better. Hero's journey is what we grew up with. It's the story our mother used to tell us when we were young. It's the movie that we're watching now and we see there's a hero in there. It's real life stories like the story of Steve Jobs, story of Elon Musk, people who are our heroes perhaps. But we sometimes forget that we are all heroes here in this room today. Not just the organizers, also the staff and the volunteers and the participants. We're all heroes in our own journey, because we all have the same common ingredients of a story in our lives, the same ingredients for a hero story, which are, we are in a common situation for many of us. We have decent lives, comfortable lives, but for many of us, especially now for those who are going to university or who are finishing university, there might be a time in which you start to feel a bit less comfortable with your current situation, with your status quo. It will be the time that the call to action will come to you. You'll think, oh, I want to develop, I want to grow, I want to change my life in a positive way. This will be your cue to maybe move abroad, go to another city or go to another country to study, to work. You know before making this decision that this is going to be a hard and a life-changing decision, because this will basically provide many challenges but also many opportunities. However, after considering it, after speaking to your family and friends, you might be able to say, okay, I'm going to go for it, and you plunge into it, you plunge into uncertainty. When you get there, it's shocking. I mean, you'll see how things are really different from what you expect, and it's even harder than you expected. What you have to do is just persevere, go for the challenges, finalize them, accomplish your goals, and at the end of the day, be comfortable to say, it's okay, I fulfilled my mission here, it's time to go back and share what I have, share what I know, share what I learned, and all the know-how I gathered. Why I told you this kind of a standard hero's journey story is because that's my story also. I left Romania when I was 18 years old to pursue my education abroad in Scotland. However, I never left our country without the thought of turning back. I always knew my mission is to go, accumulate as much knowledge as I can, and then turn back to help create the change we all want to see in the country. And this is my story, and as I said, it can be your story, and I'm sure it will be your story, because again, another, let's say, advice that I can give is that whatever, as far as you might go, home is always home, and you always have to come back and share what you learned abroad, home. And because, as inspirational as this message might sound, this is not my last advice. I actually have 3 clear messages for you guys to take on, because I spoke a lot, and maybe you're not comfortable with many of the things I said in terms of the level of depth. But these 3 messages, if only these 3 things you remember after today's presentation, I'm happy, I've done my job. Relax. It's a time when we all have to make decisions, as I said. We all have to, choose things in life at some point. What I learned, again, the hard way, is that I have to be a bit more relaxed, because the dots will connect in the end, as Steve Jobs famously said. You probably are passionate about different things now in high school, but even if you are, and even if the things are quite different one from the other, my recommendation is to just relax, let things connect, and go with the flow, I have to still learn it at some points. I am sometimes quite stressed, but I always remember this advice: relax. Let your curiosity run wild. Einstein famously said, I don't have any special talents, I'm only passionately curious. And this recommendation comes for you guys especially, because now it's your time to be curious. Now it's your time to discover yourself and the world. And last but not least, explore it, because the world is here for you to grasp. And I think there's no better time in life than in your teens, in your youth, to explore it as much as possible, and to, again, choose to pursue different things. It doesn't matter if they don't make sense initially for you or for your family or for your friends. Listen again only to your heart and what your instincts tell you. And now at the end, they also have to myth bust something, because we often hear in university, in school, to follow your passion.